to. I do have to apologise, though, that we do have a politician on the panel this evening, because yesterday it was very popular that we didn't. But she's one of our. Well, maybe. She's one of our favourite guests on Cross Question, Siobhain McDonagh. You just heard her voice there. She is Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden. She's a member of the Treasury Select Committee. David Buik, a very good friend of the programme, LBC's finance commentator and co-host of the Money podcast. Does what it says on the tin, I imagine. Ramya Jaidev is a new face on the programme. New voice on the programme, immigration and asylum commentator and co-founder of Windrush Lives. And Anita Boateng is partner at Portland Communications, a Conservative councillor who served as a special advisor in several government departments. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call, and you can text your question to 84850, and you can, of course, watch us on Global Player.
0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Is the reason you're no longer a councillor because you were defeated, or you just decided you had enough?
I stood down. I loved doing it, but I stood down.
Only so many hours in the day.
George wouldn't let you do it anymore, I bet.
Let's go to our first caller. It's Terry in Watford. Hello, Terry.
Hi, Ian. Hi, panel.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. My question is, should the electricity and gas companies be nationalised? Could I actually make just a quick point that my company, EDF, I believe is the French national company, and in a time of high prices, all their profits are going to France. They're not going to help my country.
Okay, David Buik.
It's a tough opener, isn't it? For me, believing in free enterprise and capitalism, no. But I think this is going to be a situation that moves on quite furiously in the next few months, because there are some questions to be answered. I mean, the thing, I read a statistic this morning that quite shook me, that apparently up until 3 months ago, people spent 4% of their earnings on energy. It's up to 15% now. And that is going to have a seriously damaging effect on retail come the fourth quarter, where I believe we will go into recession without any question of any doubt. I think it'll be short-lived, but I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
And of course, if the Bank of England raise rates on Thursday,
which they will, and I mean, we don't know how much by, but it's rumoured to be quite high. And if by the end of the year interest rates have gone up by 2 or 3%, mortgages are going to take a much bigger percentage of people's monthly spend as well. I know Andrew Bailey's been severely criticised for being asleep at the job, but I don't agree with that, because what he's tried to do is to balance the recovery process, which was quite strong after the pandemic, and rather than trash it out of existence by making people unable to service, as you say, in their mortgages and having less disposable income, we have to get a balance on this. But we're not answering, or I'm not answering the question of whether these companies should go into public ownership. They were successfully there until the days of Margaret Thatcher, pretty much, and then after that, they've all become privatised and supposedly more efficient. And what I don't think we've coped or had to cope with before is this unbelievable, savage cost of gas and electricity and petrol going up as a result of Putin, amongst other things. And it's really the fact that, particularly since we've seen through this Conservative election, and also, I don't think the Labour Party, but Siobhain will answer for herself, have got the answer of how we actually deal with this problem. And it isn't going away, and we have to deal with it. But I actually don't think that nationalising electricity companies or water companies is the answer to the problem.
I mean, I think part of, if my memory is right, at least a big part of the reason is why they were privatised in the first place was because the government felt that there was no way that the government could invest enough money on in the infrastructure, on this and water, indeed. Now, there may be many other reasons, ideological reasons for privatisation, but I remember that as being quite a key one. Siobhain McDonagh, you're on the Treasury Select Committee. I'm sure you talk about these issues all the time. And it has been, up until fairly recently, a key part of the Labour Party's policy to nationalise big industries. Certainly was at the last election. I know that wasn't a manifesto that you were a particular fan of. But do you think there is a case now, as Terry suggests, for the electricity and gas companies to be nationalised?
I think the problem, Terry, is how much money do you want to spend doing it? Because everything has an opportunity cost. So if we're going to nationalise the gas and electricity, what is it we're not going to do? What hospitals are we not going to build? What bridges are we not going to build? What houses? For me, social housing is the most important area that we should invest money in. So I think you've just got to think about how much it costs to do that, because most of the shareholders in the gas and electricity companies are actually our pension funds, so we have to pay them back for their shares. I do think we need to look at how the energy price cap works, because clearly it's not working effectively for people. And David talked about 4% of people's income spent on gas and electricity. For poorer people, it's more, because
but it's up to 15 now.
Yeah, because, it will be even more than that for many of my constituents. It's predicted that people will pay on average £500 in January. Well, that's rent level, that's mortgage level, that's completely unpayable by anybody. So I think both of the Conservative candidates for leader of the Conservative Party are just not being realistic, because people are going to have to be helped through the autumn and through winter and possibly well into next year, or we're going to watch destitution on a massive level.
Ramya?
Yes.
You think there should be?
Yes.
Why?
I think it's ultimately an ideological question. I appreciate the sort of detail on finance that's being put forth by both David and Siobhain, but the question is ultimately about, a bit like internet broadband, the question is ultimately about who owns a utility, something that everybody uses, everybody has to have access to. And ideologically, I just think, yes, they should be nationalised. If anything, the kind of recent price, sort of rampant increase in prices, coupled with the fact that there are profits being paid out to the companies themselves, I think it makes it clear that the core interest that is the most important is not being prioritised, which is, these are utilities, these are supposed to be things that all people have access to, all people have equal access to, and that's just not happening.
But do you not have to differentiate between the theoretical and the practical, in that in your ideal world, this would be the case, but as Siobhain has explained, in theory, you could just sequestrate them and not pay any compensation at all, but that would have a terrible effect on the economy. Indeed. So do you not have to take that into account as well?
You do. So that's why I'm saying it's an ideological question. So I think there are in either direction, there are going to be practicalities that need to be sorted out. In either direction, there are going to be problems. I think if you strip all that, you're going to have to deal with that, whatever happens. I think if you strip that back and look at the question, at the root of it, yes, I think they're utilities. They should be owned by the public.
Okay. Anita?
I just think there's no way to divorce the theory from the reality, right? The question is, what does nationalisation get us? And practically all the problems we're encountering, whether that's because of the Ukrainian crisis creating this problem, whether it's because of the reality of the amount that people are going to be spending on their energy bills, these are things that are going to need to be grappled with. And also, fundamentally, the question of investment, because this is a story about our transition. We have to get to a position where we are no longer as reliant as we are on some of the volatile energy resources. And that may not be in the immediate future, but it is going to be the long-term vision. And the question is, who is able to put the level of resources that is required into the sector to make sure that it's profitable and makes sense? And that is the private energy companies. And I think that at the moment, they're obviously going through a period of having enormous profits as a result of things that have nothing to do with them. So I do have some sympathy.
The oil companies are. I'm not sure. David, you'll know this. The actual energy companies themselves, a lot of the smaller ones, went out of business.
Yeah. No,
so what are the profit levels like for some of the electricity companies?
Most of the electricity companies that have been, solid, the SSEs and the various other people have done very well, because they've got very strong balance sheets. and they've been able to pick up some of the slack from those people that have gone broke. But Anita's point is absolutely correct. The transition period, when we're going to see more onshore, more offshore, hopefully some fracking if people stop throwing their toys out of the pram. And, well, I know it's a controversial thing to say, but,
I can sense hostility from my left here.
I can see hostility at the other end of the table.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but,
And Siobhain's not known for being hostile,
No. I just feel that this is absolutely... The thing that I complain about most of these companies is they are inefficiently run. And I don't think, and I'd love to hear from Siobhain on this, is take Thames Water that's been behaving badly for years and years and years, and nothing ever seems to happen to them.
Siobhain?
Oh, absolutely. There's an area in my constituency that regularly gets flooded, and to actually get them to look at the problem and do something about it down in Lower Morden is really, really hard. The amount of dirty water they push into rivers and all the rest of it. Yeah, without a serious regulator, you're not going to see substantial improvement, are you?
No.
I think the trouble is that any system is only as strong as the people in it and as the regulation of it.
Well, and as the competition, because, of course, in the water sector, by definition, there is no competition. No. And so, therefore, if there's a monopoly... as a capitalist, even I can recognise if there's a monopoly, that will lead to inefficiencies, and you aren't as responsive to your customers as you are if you have competitors.
Surely it depends on how you're regulated. The amount of water bursts that we see, particularly at this time of year, right across London, is extraordinary. And the profits they've made over time have just
Let's bring in another caller who's got a question on this subject. Robbie's in Chelmsford. Robbie, go ahead. Hi.
Evening, hi. So what if we all just stop paying our bills for electricity and gas?
I suspect that might happen.
I think that's a really interesting question. It's a horrifying question because, you see, I always think if somebody stops paying one bill, it's quite easy to then stop paying another bill, isn't it? And what a whole economic system collapses if we all start disobeying the rules.
And could I just say...
Hang on a second.
Sorry.
Yeah, completely. I think the question is, what if we all stopped doing it? Then I think the entire system would collapse. And I think fundamentally, what we do need is to provide targeted support to those people who cannot afford this. And there are lots of them. I'm not suggesting there aren't. And that is why, obviously we've got the package right now that's going to bring in £1,200 to people that most need it. And I do worry sometimes that people aren't aware that there is more help coming. And I think, Siobhain, you're probably right that actually... this is not going to be as short-lived as is hoped, and actually we are going to be looking at more support into 2023. But there is more help coming than what has been announced and received so far. So people, I understand why they're worried. They don't need to panic just yet and be planning for these kinds of scenarios, because I think that I can imagine a scenario where the government provides further support for those most in need.
Okay, Siobhain.
So I'm sorry, Ian, what I was kind of trying to say, to interrupt, the only group of people who can't stop paying are the poorest on the prepayment meters, because if they don't pay, they have no heating, they have no hot water, because they're immediately going to be cut off. But for those people on quarterly bills who aren't really managing, who've got kids at home, I think substantial numbers of people will stop paying, and then the companies won't be able legally to cut them off. And once you get into that level of disobedience, it's very, very hard to claw it back.
Well, we had some friends staying over the weekend, and I was looking at the smart meter and how it sort of racked up. Bear in mind, because there were extra people in the house, but I'm thinking, but this is actually quite a normal number of people to have in a house. And from the Friday to the end of Sunday, I think it went up by about £17, which, doesn't sound an awful lot when you look at it from that point of view. But then you rack that up every 2 days. You think, well, how does a normal family on an average income pay that kind of bill? Ramya, would you stop paying your bill?
I'm not going to answer that question. But I am going to point out that there is a strong grassroots campaign around not paying, and I know there are differing views about this. But I just want to pick up on something that Anita mentioned, which is offering targeted support to people in order to enable them to pay the bills. The burden that's implied by that is really strange. We're saying we need to provide support to people in order to be able to pay the bills to the companies. Why aren't we saying that the problem is the bills? We seem to be implying there that the problem is that people can't afford the bills. Well, yes, they can't because the bills are too high. I mean, we're looking at it backwards.
But you can take that to another extent, though. You can say, well, inflation is rocketing, the household shop is increasing in cost every week, so therefore I'm just going to walk out the supermarket with a full trolley.
Well, even in the context of everything else that's happening in terms of the cost of living, the energy sector price increases are just off the charts, especially compared to the amounts that are being reaped back in terms of profits. But there is a broader question there, absolutely. Like, if you can't afford to live anymore, what do you do? But I think history tells us the answer to this.
Go on.
The people revolt. If you can't afford to live, what do you do?
But isn't this where our welfare state is supposed to kick in?
Well, yeah.
And to be fair, actually has done by and large over the years. But this is a whole new challenge, isn't it? Now, there's a great discussion on this. We are going to move on in a moment because lots of other calls coming in. 0345 6060 973. If you can't get through the first time, do keep trying. It's 17 minutes past 8.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
19 minutes past 8 on LBC. Well, I thought the discussion on energy prices more than surpassed our discussions last night. So well done to our panel. Let me reintroduce them to you. Anita Boateng is partner at Portland Communications, and she used to be a special advisor in various government departments. Ramya Jaidev is an immigration and asylum commentator and co-founder of Windrush Lives. And I discovered when she walked into the studio that actually she interned in my company about 10 years ago now. So there we go. Look what's happened to us since. David Buik has never interned for me, or indeed anyone else, I suspect. He's LBC's finance commentator and co-host of the Money podcast. And Siobhain McDonagh is Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden and a member of the Treasury Select Committee. Right, let's go to our next caller. It's James in Ayrshire. Hello, James.
Hello, Ian. Good evening to your panel. My question is a kind of political ethics question, and it's as follows. How appropriate is it that the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is going to be selected by 150,000 or thereabouts, largely male, largely middle class to elderly, and largely well-off men living in the southeast of England?
Wow. I'm reliably informed the Conservative Party membership is nearer 180,000, but let's not worry about 30,000. Anita, now you were involved. Can I reveal that you were involved in the last Conservative leadership election?
Yes.
You're not involved in this one.
No.
But you do know the Conservative Party membership. Not every single one of them, obviously. Is James's description right?
Well, I am a member. I am not elderly, well off, or male. So I think I would probably dispute that it's all of the people. But I think basically all political parties are mostly older. They're all in their 50s, including Labour. Mostly middle class. People that get involved in politics tend to be mostly white. The Conservatives are a little more white than your average political party, but not very much so. And so I think there is a question about like who chooses to participate in politics in that very formal way, and how do all parties encourage more involvement. On the question of whether it's appropriate, I think that really there's always problems with any existing system that you use to select your party leader, but I think it's probably better than all the other alternatives. The idea is that you've got some confidence of MPs, and then you have your membership, and James, you are welcome to join the Conservative Party, to join that cadre and maybe break.
He's in Scotland. He's not going to do that after what Liz Truss said yesterday, is he?
No chance.
Maybe you'll join to vote for Sunak. I don't know, but I like the idea of members and people getting more involved, more membership, and actually them being empowered to make a decision like their party leader. In this case, it means you're going to be Prime Minister too, but that Prime Minister will be put to electoral tests. It seems to me it's not an ideal system, but it's better than the alternatives.
Do you think that they could change the system? Because this system might work when the Tories are in opposition, but when you're in government, it does seem a little bit incongruous to have a relatively small part of the population effectively choosing who the next Prime Minister is. Wouldn't it be better if it was left to MPs when they're in government?
I think that people like Danny Finkelstein, who I really respect, have put forward this point of view. I guess my take is that there is something about you needing to go out, participate in hustings, participate in debates, participate in head-to-heads that probably would be dramatically truncated if it was just a case of MPs. And I like the idea of putting MPs through their paces who want to lead the party and judging how well they would do in an election campaign. So David Cameron came through because actually he did do well with the MPs, don't get me wrong, but it was really that process of him talking to the party, but also, in brackets, to the country, that led a lot of members to go, that is a man that can win us elections. So
I have a slightly different memory of that period, where actually, if you look at the debates that he and David Davis had, head-to-head, TV, whether or hustings, David Davis won most of them. It was that speech at the conference that did it.
So that long campaign allows
but you're
you to
right
see.
in terms of sort of putting them through their paces. I mean, we've seen today, Liz Truss has had a fantastic few days, and then today she goes and blows it. Siobhain McDonagh, now, I don't know whether you would accept James Inesh's description of Tory party members, or indeed whether you might recognise the same description of the Labour Party.
Well, I assure you, Mitcham and Morden Labour Party is a very diverse body because of the area that it covers. And so we have a very large Ghanaian population, so we have a lot of Ghanaian members. We've got a lot of Windrush type generation when people from the Caribbean came over and joined. We've got a lot of Irish people. So it's a bit of a reflection of my bit of London. But I imagine that, as Anita said, that is what a lot of political parties look like. But if you have a parliamentary system and your Prime Minister is the leader of the largest party in Parliament, I am not quite sure how else you do it other than go to some sort of primary system.
Do it the Labour way?
Yeah.
Just get lots of random...
But the dilemma for all political parties is that because Labour and Conservative are to the left or the right of the centre of political gravity, they campaign towards their members to become leader with a much more extreme policy than they intend to face the electorate with. And that was Liz Truss's problem today, wasn't it? It sounded great to Tory party members that she was going to cut the civil servants, she was going to cut their pay, until they thought, oh my God, in most of the North, a lot of our members are people who work in the public sector, who are head teachers, they are sisters on wards, they are police
Some
officers.
civil servants actually vote Tory.
Absolutely, I think about 40%.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know,
what was she thinking?
Well, I think she was thinking it sounded great to Tory party members, only when it touched reality and the voter, that crumbled in her hand.
Do you think, Ramya, that there are sometimes a lot of, I don't know if the prejudice is the right word, but people have this stereotypical image of a Labour Party supporter or a Conservative Party supporter or a Liberal Democrat supporter who has a beard and wears sandals, which does actually happen to be true most of the time. But that was a joke, ladies and gentlemen, a joke.
Oh, I thought that was a Liberal Democrat.
Hard fact.
But is that a problem where I think James's description of Conservative Party members 10 years ago might well have been true. I always remember back in 2004, I heard Liam Fox give a presentation about the makeup, the demographics of Conservative Party members. And he said, you know, within the next 10 years, 30% of these people will be dead. And the Conservative Party demographics will be very, very different. Now, I think they are quite different now to what they were, but people still, like James, has this image of what a Conservative looks like.
Well, it would be disingenuous of me to try and address that directly because I don't actually know what the racial or demographic breakdown of the Conservative membership is. I know the impression, I'm familiar with the impression that James is communicating, but I can't give you any facts on that. What I do know is this. The question comes from a place of feeling disenfranchised, and that ultimately is to do with the system as a whole rather than which party and what the makeup of that party is and therefore who gets to vote in the specific leadership election. I think it's weird and I think it's wrong that there has effectively been a meltdown of government that just it went on and on and on and on. And at the end of that, we're electing a party leader rather than having a general election. Now, again, that's about the whole system. It's not about, you know, the specific procedure used by the Conservative Party. You know, if Labour was in that position, it would be the same thing all over again.
But it is the Conservative Party to change their leader when things get bad and present themselves as
don't you
another...
wish you'd been able to do that?
Oh, absolutely.
Again, I'm not particularly, you know, it would be wrong of me to sort of give an opinion on that because I don't really know the facts on that. But as just a general voter, like James, I think this is what he's getting at. It feels inappropriate to me because not only am I part of a demographic that's just not at all included, but as Siobhain pointed out, when these hustings go on and when these policies get aired, the candidates are pandering, I'm going to use that word, to increasingly sort of extreme wings of who it is that they think are going to be voting.
But maybe they've misjudged their electorate, that the social attitudes of modern day Conservative members are rather different to those of those members 20 years ago.
I mean, are they? I don't know.
I would say that they are.
I think they are, but I think one thing I might just chip in here very quickly is that what makes me feel very uncomfortable about what's going on at the moment is this is the fourth Prime Minister that we're doing this. And that is too much. I mean, as a generalisation. And I just think that the way that the hustings have been sort of handled when you did it, I thought was excellent before.
Well, they've only had two. So
yeah, no, but I mean...
Are you saying that you didn't like the way Nick Ferrari handled the first hustings,
handled it beautifully.
David?
No, I'm saying...
I will have to report back on this.
You will not report back, because I have already congratulated him. But I thought the way that Channel 4 and BBC handled it was disgraceful, just awful. It was like a fishwives gathering, and it was just dreadful.
What was it that you thought was dreadful? I'm just curious. What was it?
When, you know, somebody wants to speak for 5 minutes or 3 minutes on a subject, let them speak. And don't come over the top of them and shout and
The whole
scream.
point of debates and hustings is that there is a bit of interplay. It's not just letting someone speak. I mean, that's incredibly boring if you conduct it like that. I mean,
Well, I'll tell Nick Ferrari you said that, because, you know, I thought he'd handled it really well.
Well, I thought he handled it really well,
you know,
too.
we had a you know, they had 5 minutes each, and then there was questions from him, and then there was questions
David,
from...
And that's
I was
the same
doing a
format that I
tour
did.
today of Parliament for the Dons Local Action Group. They're AFC Wimbledon fans who set themselves up as a voluntary project to get food for people during lockdown, furniture, all sorts of things. And I was telling them that the chamber of the House of Commons is so small because Winston Churchill wanted it that way in order to have cut and thrust and have debate. I think people often say they don't like the arguments and stuff, but I have to tell you, people always want to come to Prime Minister's questions because that's
quite.
precisely what they want to see.
Anita, were you at the Excel Centre for the hustings last time?
Yes.
Because I've said that, I can't remember whether I've said it on here before, but I certainly have fairly recently. There were 4,000 people in the audience there, and I can remember sitting there listening while Jeremy Hunt or Boris Johnson were sort of doing their thing, looking out into that audience and thinking, this audience is the antithesis of what James in Ayrshire. Obviously, I didn't know James in Ayrshire was going to ask this question, but I reckon 35 to 40% of the audience were not white. I mean, this is obviously in London. And I thought, well, this seems to me to be a reasonably fair reflection of the London electorate. And I suspect if that event had been held in Chichester, for example, it would have been very, very different. But you can only reflect the community that you're in, I guess.
I think that's fair. And also, I mean, I was the first black councillor in Redbridge. It didn't come from the Labour Party, it came from the Conservatives. And we had more female leadership. We had, there's a huge amount of diversity in my local association. It's Redbridge, so it's London, of course, but I think that really does come through.
Fairly.
And,
more Essex.
And I also think, to the point about how Labour leaders act. I mean, look at Keir Starmer. I think he played a very left game when it came to getting selected as Labour leader, and then now he has made a firm pivot, which has caused somewhat of a meltdown in the past couple of weeks. And I think that, part of this is the cut and thrust of politics. But to answer your specific question, I do think that the party is increasingly outward looking. And I think some of the conversations we've had, of course, there has been an element of things like making the most of Brexit. I don't personally think that's an undiverse point. But a lot of it's been focused on things that tax and spend and about what does it mean to invest in the NHS and what does it mean to get growth going. So I feel like it's not a dissimilar conversation to the one we would be having in any general election.
Okay.
Except I do think the whole tax initiatives are just mad because they've both been in that cabinet for years.
Well, we may come on to that. We may come on to that. You never know. And talking of Keir Starmer, Jackie Smith and I will be interviewing Keir Starmer live at the Edinburgh Fringe next Friday. If you happen to be in the Edinburgh area and would like some entertainment, why not? It's 8:33 on LBC. Andy Ivey has the news headlines.
Archie Battersby's mother has confirmed the family's legal team will submit another application to the European Court of Human Rights in an attempt to postpone the withdrawal of her 12-year-old son's life support. His treatment is due to be stopped at the Royal London Hospital at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Liz Truss has abandoned a flagship policy to slash £8.8 billion from public sector pay outside London. Senior Conservatives warned it would be levelling down the nation by leaving nurses, police officers and teachers poorer off. Nancy Pelosi has landed in Taiwan on a US Air Force transport plane. China has condemned the trip by the Speaker of the House of Representatives as a threat to peace and stability. LBC weather tonight, low cloud for some central and western parts of England and Wales, very warm in the south. Tomorrow, sunny spells and scattered showers in the north, sunny spells in the south, a high of 28 degrees.
LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:36. Rob on Twitter has a question for David Buik. What is wrong with fishwives?
Nothing. But there's a time and a place for everything, isn't there? And, it's a question of how much blasphemy you want and how it's controlled otherwise. But
okay. That is the voice of David Buik, LBC's finance commentator and fishwife commentator and co-host of the Money podcast. Ramya Jaidev is here also, immigration and asylum commentator and co-founder of Windrush Lives, which is an advocacy group and victim support network. I mean, I guess from that we understand what it is, but how did you become involved with it and why did you decide to found it?
By accident. So during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, I started thinking about other demographics, other sort of groups of black people that weren't necessarily represented just by the people who were striking on the streets, and read some things online and came across the story of someone called Anthony Williams, got in touch with him through the journalist, and it just spiraled out of control from there. We started talking to Anthony and then very quickly found 10, 15, 20 other people who were in the same situation, and what was absolutely appalling was just how powerless they had been rendered by just the series of events that they've been put through, and so it just went from there, really.
And Siobhain McDonagh is Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden, member of the all-powerful Treasury Select Committee. We always have to use that description, don't we? Anita Boateng is partner at Portland Communications and was a special advisor under the Conservative government in various government departments. Right, let's go to the next question. It's from Malcolm in Bodmin. Hello, Malcolm.
Evening, Ian. Evening, panel. Does the panel agree with me that the Conservative Party is essentially about to do what the Labour Party did, in that following Blair, we had Gordon Brown as the Labour leader. The Conservatives are about to go from Boris Johnson to one of the two candidates, which essentially is a choice between Jeremy Corbyn or the equivalent of a choice between Jeremy Corbyn and Michael Foot for the Labour Party.
Okay, well, I'm going to narrow that down and sort of narrow it down to are they about to elect their equivalent of Gordon Brown? But now, Siobhain McDonagh, that there was no real election when Gordon Brown took over. It was sort of by acclamation. And I always thought that was a mistake, I think, because leaders do need to be tested. And OK, Gordon Brown had been Chancellor for 10 years, but do you think the Conservatives are about to fall into the same trap?
I don't think Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss are any Gordon Brown. I mean, I was one of only 7 MPs who didn't nominate him to be leader. So I wasn't at that stage his biggest fan, but the man had an enormous brain. He saved us in 2008 from so much of a financial nightmare. Things could have been so much worse. And I don't think they come anywhere near him. I mean, on the Treasury Select Committee, I've had quite a lot of fun at Rishi Sunak's expense by asking him whether it's fair that people who own 3 houses get 3 lots of £400 towards their fuel bills. I would never have got away with that with Gordon Brown.
No, he would have slapped you down, wouldn't he?
He would have slapped me out, yeah.
Is there any Labour leader apart from Tony Blair that you've actually liked?
Thought Harold Wilson was quite good. Historically, I'm sure Clement Attlee did some pretty amazing things, yeah. I mean, you know...
But you haven't mentioned Keir Starmer in that list.
I think I've told you before, Ian, I didn't vote for Keir Starmer, but I thank God every day for him because, you know, he's decent, he wants to do a good job, he's trying to bring the Labour Party back from the brink, which is what represented 2019 general election results, so I wouldn't criticise him.
Ramya.
So I'm not entirely sure I understand Malcolm's question. Are you there, Malcolm?
Well, I think it's the question is essentially, look, you've had one very charismatic leader like Tony Blair or Boris Johnson, and you're about to elect somebody who, should we say, is a bit charismatic.
You don't think
rather than it being a lame duck
You don't think it's a
situation.
bit more going extremism?
Well, come to
Well,
you,
yeah, exactly.
David,
So there are a few different ways that you could look at that. On the charisma point, charisma is so subjective. I don't think Boris Johnson's charismatic. I think
Really? Even his worst enemy would describe him as that, I think.
He's charismatic in the way that people used to say, and now they would get Me Too'd for it. There's charisma, there's genuine charisma, which is intelligence and engagement. And then there's a sort of level of sleaziness.
Genuine charisma is walking down a high street and people come out of the shops to have a selfie with you. Isn't it?
Okay, it's subjective.
That's how I would
it's
define it.
wildly subjective,
And,
right?
and,
So
and they probably wouldn't necessarily with Rishi Sunak or Gordon Brown, and they probably, well, you see, even Liz Truss, I'm not sure they would.
Well, she probably has her own photographer there for that. But the point, I mean, it does it. I'm not sure this. I'm not sure this is It's not an insult to you in any way, Malcolm. But I'm not sure this is a thing that we should necessarily be worrying about. I think I'm not a particular fan of any of the Labour leaders that there have been, but the point that Siobhain made a short while ago about somebody's intelligence and capability to do the job, particularly after the shenanigans we've heard over the past few years, that has to take precedence.
David?
I think I interpret Malcolm's question a little differently because...
Sound like a politician now.
The
question that you really meant to ask was...
No, I'm going to interpret what I think he meant. No, I mean, going from Tony Blair to Gordon Brown, and then we've got Boris Johnson, and is it going to be Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak? That implied, I think, that the Conservative Party was going to heave seriously to the right. And I think we've seen Liz Truss do that, I think dangerously so. And I don't apologise, I am a Tory member and I'm very much a Conservative. But I don't like the tone of the way she's running her campaign at all. And I don't think, without being disrespectful, that she is particularly numerate. I mean, she is going to pay for the world. And I don't know where all these sums come, or even on the back of a player's #1 cigarette packet. I can't make it work out at all. And I think what I'm saying is that as the gap closes, I think the last time I listened to your programme, Ian, it was about 24% the lead. Liz Truss over Rishi Sunak. I think that's narrowed substantially.
Yeah, John Curtis said ignore that because that was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and a lot has happened since then.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting that there haven't been many polls because actually Conservative Party members are very difficult to poll. Mm-hmm. How do you actually even do it?
Do it, I know.
Anita.
Yeah, another interpretation of this question. My read was very much that, Gordon Brown was a planner. He was someone who's effective as Chancellor, but couldn't make that leap to Prime Minister. He couldn't be reactive, and fleet of foot, and he couldn't set out a very clear policy direction, and also was prone to fly off the handle. So, Siobhain, I think you could have had a phone coming your way had you made some of the remarks you made earlier. Well, it's documented.
But intellectually, he would have. He would have come back at me in a way that Rishi just wasn't. He just felt. He wasn't able to do it.
He gets hissy, doesn't he, when people challenge him? I thought this was weird because he's allegedly the kind of intellectual
as well, who I thought was a champion. I thought he was excellent.
Yeah,
I'm not sure Gordon saw it that way, but
well, I'm sorry, I did.
So to answer your question, I think that actually they're just very different. I think that Sunak and Truss are very. I mean, Truss, for instance, is talking about moving the party in a dramatically different direction when it comes to orthodoxy. I mean, that's the one thing you can say. She's running a sort of insurgent, iconoclastic, irreverent campaign that it's all about challenging the status quo. I'm not sure that you could call Gordon Brown a challenger of the status quo. I think Sunak, I guess the comparison is that he was a former Chancellor and is broadly looking to follow a similar economic direction, but I think his style of government would be immensely different, and actually he's very well-tempered, and I find him incredibly intelligent and incredibly patient, which I think maybe is not coming through in media, and incredibly kind. So in no sense do I think that this is about to be the equivalent of Gordon Brown. And I also think both of them care relentlessly about winning elections. I'm not sure that Gordon spent a lot of time thinking enough about what he would do once he was Prime Minister.
Yeah, but he was absolutely focused on winning an election.
But he didn't know how to. He had no fingertip feel for it.
He could do it. I think the point that you made, Anita, he could do it as the number 2 in the organisation. I mean, he was instrumental in getting Labour to the position where they could get elected in 97. He was the big brain of the outfit. But it's the point that you made, you know, what we need for, or what we expect from a Prime Minister is very different in the 21st century with rolling news media, with the event of social media. You have to be able to make 100 decisions a day and realise a substantial number of them may go wrong, and you've got a gap the next morning and do the same thing. There are very few personalities that can do that, and the ones that can really stand out.
Well, we're about to find out which one of them is going to be our next Prime Minister in, a month's time, isn't it? 5 weeks' time. 5 weeks more of this. Thank goodness I'm on holiday for most of it. Malcolm, thank you very much for that. It's 8:46.
LBC. Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Brexit Opportunities Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg. You and I speaking in June 2018.
There'll be no need for checks at Dover, even if there are delays at Calais. The delays will not be at Dover, they will be at Calais.
Delays will not be at Dover. You'll be aware 2 weeks ago it was actually declared a critical incident, a response to what you said some years ago.
They are French-created delays.
And are you prepared to apologise that you got that wrong?
Yes, of course I got that wrong, but I got it wrong for the right reason, if I may put it that way.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player. LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
10 to 9 on LBC. Siobhain, McDonagh, David Buik, Ramya, Jaidev and Anita Boateng with us answering your questions. YouGov have just, we were talking about this, YouGov have just issued a new poll of Conservative Party members carried out between the 29th of July and today. It doesn't say here how many people took part, which I always think is interesting in these things. Anyway, the Liz Truss 60%, Sunak 26%. She's up 11, he's down 5. So, and they've got, it says headline 6. I don't know what that means. Liz Truss 69%, Rishi Sunak 31%. Oh, that was back from the 20th of July. So it has narrowed, but 60 to 26. I mean, I think I'd settle for that if I was Liz Truss. Right, let's go to another question. Adam is in Doncaster. Hello, Adam.
Hello there, how are you?
Hello, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I mean, I've got lots to say, but I'll keep it brief. Are you guys in support of the teachers' union going on strike? They're balloting us next month and potentially we're going on strike. Do you agree with that or disagree?
So you're a teacher. Are you intending to vote for a strike?
Yes, absolutely. My own personal circumstances, I've had to take on a second job because, the cost of living and such. I'm delivering pizzas at the weekend just to make ends meet. And as a teacher, it's hard to do that.
And what is the pay offer that teachers are being offered?
I believe it was 6% last time I looked.
Okay. Anita.
My sister's a teacher, so I should be careful. No, I think that I can understand most of the public sector making a bid for inflation-busting price rises. We can all see it. I think the government's options are to balance the needs of specific individual public sector requests and the broader challenges across the economy. We've just talked about what might be happening around inflation and whether if you give inflation-busting pay rises across the piece, and lots of people in the UK are employed by public sector workers, you end up baking in some of the challenges around inflation further on. So I understand why you as an individual teacher or teachers in general might feel they need to go as far as to strike because it has been a really tough couple of years. And of course, like the challenges around helping kids to recover from COVID are enormous. And actually, there's a lot of indications that kids are falling so far behind that teachers are picking up a lot of that slack. Nevertheless, I can understand where as a government, by the time you get to government, there are no good choices, and the government has to make difficult choices that mean that things like a 5% pay rise, which I believe is what's been offered, is the balance that they are able to offer. The other point I'd make is that I do recognise there are huge and acute challenges around teachers' retention and skills, and that is a problem we're facing across the economy with lots of people kind of permanently out of the economy at the moment, mostly on long-time sick, it seems to be. So there are huge problems around recruitment too, which have to be balanced. So I don't think the Pay Review Commission, I don't think the government had easy choices here, and they probably have got it about right, she says.
Ramya, 2 or 3 years ago, if teachers had been offered a 5% pay rise, they would have been dancing in the streets. But of course, inflation is now over 9%, so it doesn't seem as generous as on the face of it might do.
Well, no, it's incommensurate with the increase in the cost of living, isn't it? I mean, it won't surprise any of you to hear that my answer to Adam is yes. I absolutely am in support of a teacher strike. You should absolutely go on strike. And I think we've reached a point where nothing makes sense anymore, and the only way to try and claw some sort of meaning out of anything, and the only way to try and set things right is to actually put ourselves on the line and say, look, this doesn't work. To the point about having to make difficult choices in government, something's got to you got to make the cut somewhere. There are other things. There are other things on which this government has spaffed money. There are, just off the top of my head, for example, the government legal department just absolutely spaffs money defending the most ludicrous claims all of the time. Now, I'm not saying that's in any way going to make up the deficit and kind of, be equivalent to the amount that you would need in order to give cost of living raises. But my point is, it's not accurate to say that these are the sort of best balances that could be struck. I think the reality is there is a lot of money that gets wasted on lots of things, and there is absolutely no transparency about that unless you dive into footnotes and chase after select committee reports and issue FOI after FOI after FOI, which then get rejected and, again, incurring a cost in that. It's not true. It's just not true that these are choices that have to be made in this way.
I didn't talk about cost, by the way. I talked about inflation. But I take your broader point, which is that DFE has a spending envelope. Which
I think you've actually, though, Ramya, just identified Boris Johnson's main legacy from his premiership. This word spaff that I'd never heard of before, but it is now commonplace, and we don't have to apologise because apparently it is a rude word, but everybody uses it now. Siobhain's looking mystified. Now, Siobhain, would you be in favour of a teachers' strike?
Adam, I completely defend your right to withdraw your labour and to go on strike, but I sincerely hope that you don't, because the kids that get hurt most are the ones who need you most. And that, I appreciate that is the dilemma for teachers. We look at, we need growth in our economy. We need people to learn more, be better educated. So you are right at the front of the people we need to be doing things. And you certainly shouldn't be working at the weekend delivering pizzas. And so we've got to find some way round this. I defend your right to vote for that strike, but I so hope that the government will step in and will negotiate and it will be avoided.
David?
Well, as I understand it, we've seen for the private sector average wage increases of about 8%, and in the public sector, somewhere between 2 and 5%. To my very simple mind, I'm a monosyllabic congenital throwback. That actually tells me general strike, because we've got the police, we've got all the hospital staff, we've got the teachers, we've got barristers who I know have just had 15%, we've got ASLEF, we've got RMT, the list is endless. And the fact remains is that why I disapprove so much, I don't disapprove, I do, I'm frustrated that this Tory party election bizarre, should I say, is going on endlessly. We need a government back immediately, because this problem is not going away. And I'm not saying all these wage claims at around 7 or 8% should be settled at that level. But what I want to know is what the government is going to do to people who cannot afford to live. And that is, for me, absolute priority. I think, as you say, Siobhain, somebody has the right to come out on strike if they want to. I desperately hope they don't in this case. But the whole situation, as far as I'm personally concerned, has become ridiculously severe, and it's dangerous.
Adam, let's come back to you. What do you make of what you've heard from our panel?
There was a few comments I agreed with, a few that I disagreed with. I think as teachers in the profession, we're not respected. I mean, I get into school from 7 a.m. I stay, marking all my books and such. But we're not just teachers. We're social workers. We're babysitters. We're security guards. We're agony aunts. We're relationship counsellors. And it used to be a middle-class job. But I just don't feel that educators are respected, and I don't think it is what it used to be as a profession. And we're in a rock and a hard place. Like, I don't want to strike because I love the children I work for, and I want them to achieve the best. But on the other hand, I've got my own family to support and my own career to chase, and I can't progress at the moment as it is. So it's a rock and a hard place. It really is difficult.
Adam, thank you very much for your call. Let's finish. We normally finish with a fun text, but we've got a fun caller today. Richard is in Knockholt. Richard, when I saw what you were about to ask, I was thinking, what on earth is this about? What's your question? Then just explain it a little bit.
It's whether the new mayor of Cockington in Devon should be allowed back into his local pub, the Drum Inn. And yes, he was just appointed, given this honour about 2 weeks ago.
Right.
That's my question, whether...
OK. Now, do we all know about the Mayor of Cockington? Actually, Richard, I think you should explain who the Mayor of Cockington is.
Well, he's a miniature Shetland pony, and he's been doing valuable work at the pub. And I think there are some naysayers who object to the honour he's had. And I feel he ought to be allowed back to his local.
Well, if Hartlepool can elect a monkey as mayor, I don't see why the good people of Cockington shouldn't have a Shetland pony as mayor. Let's quickly go around the table. Siobhain.
Well, I don't think the mayor should be discriminated against on the basis that he was elected.
They're being horsist.
Yeah. If he was allowed in the pub before, surely he should continue to be allowed.
How could a horse be elected? Because he wouldn't be able to sign his nomination papers. There's something fishy going on here.
Yeah. Do you think
Horsey.
was the pony the only creature that stood?
Ramya.
You're
gobstruck, aren't you, if that's a word?
I mean, yes, he should be allowed into the pub.
I wonder
what the general rule shouldn't be allowed into pubs, but if he went in there
it's a Shetland pony. They're not sort of...
No, they're quite small.
Horses,
I wonder what the favourite tipple of the mayor of Cockington is. Anita.
So I heard that actually what happened is the local council, the Pen didn't have planning permission. They had to reclassify it as a garden to be able to get
amazing
into
what
the
you can
pub.
find on Google,
so
isn't it?
I think, I said red. I didn't say I've learnt. And so I think this is classic local council meddling, and I think they need to rethink this because he is the mayor and he has the right to be in the pub.
I disagree.
I'll join the
garden.
campaign.
Keep the grass down.
Apparently, the mayor's favourite tipple is Guinness. I was trying to think of a drink that was the horsey name, but I'm afraid my brain is so addled. What, Little Pony? Is that a drink?
Yeah, it was a stout in a bottle. It was the little drink with a big kick.
With a big what?
Kick.
Oh, OK, thank you very much, Siobhain. And that is the voice of Siobhain McDonagh. David Buik, Ramya, Jaidev and Anita Boateng, thank you very much indeed for joining us on LBC. In a moment, I want to get your calls on China and Taiwan because Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the US House of Representatives, she is now in Taiwan. The Chinese are very, very angry. They've sent 20 military planes into Taiwanese airspace. Do you think she should have gone? 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 2 minutes past 9.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, Archie Battersby's family have confirmed one final appeal will be made in the morning to keep him alive. The 12-year-old has been in a coma since an accident in April left him severely brain damaged. The Royal London Hospital says carrying on his life support is not in his best interests. Here's LBC's correspondent.